Sure, Gary. Over those 20 years, we've conducted over 3,100 experiments on board this space station. Those 3,100 experiments have been done by over 4,100 investigators and represent the work of over 108 regions and countries. The work going on the space station is not only there to help us with our exploration goals for how to go further into space, but also to bring back benefits for Earth and to produce a commercial marketplace in low Earth orbit. All three of these objectives, along with the international cooperation that it took to build such an amazing laboratory in space, are great examples of the objectives of the ISS program.
Kurt, we know that today's mission is critical to providing us with a steady cadence of operational flights. But why is it so important for us to have this capability from a research perspective?
That's a great question. Today's test flight brings us to the beginning of the commercial crew program, a commercial crew program which will raise our occupancy on the U.S. segment of the space station to 4 astronauts. And that 4th astronaut comes as a real premium to doing research on the space station. The tasks don't get particularly more intensive to do systems and maintenance, so that 4th astronaut, that time becomes dedicated to performing more science. In fact, enough time that it will essentially double the amount of crew time we have to perform experiments on board station. The return to U.S. soil also brings us the ability to return samples more quickly and get human samples back down to the ground more quickly as well.
Kurt, you're talking about all this great research, you're talking about scientific experiments, but what would you say to someone who's watching this and thinking, this isn't relevant to me, I'm never going to space, I don't do science? What do you say to those people?
Well, again, one of the focuses is on the ISS benefits for humanities. And for all of us who've been stuck at home during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been wondering, wouldn't it be nice to have more bandwidth? Why does the internet slow down? Some of the research we're doing on board space station, particularly into Z-band optical fiber, is using the fact that we don't have sedimentation in a microgravity environment to develop new materials that'll help us build more perfect fiber optic cables, which will allow us for better bandwidth and lower cost in implementing networks here on Earth. And then if you're not really a tech geek, maybe your interests lie more in human health. And then we have multiple experiments going on to help us develop new drugs, new treatments on board the ISS. Pharmaceutical companies are working on methods that allow us to crystallize proteins in space in a more purified and more standardized method. And this could lead to monoclonal antibody suspensions that we can treat through injection instead of a painful infusion. We also are developing studies into our capability to produce tissues and organs in space. Again, because you don't have sedimentation, there's a capability there to produce more realistic tissues that can someday possibly be used to prevent human disease.
Now, Kurt, I know they have some cargo going up with them, but I understand they plan to bring some science back.
That's right, Gary. A lot of their cargo going up with them are crew supplies and EVA supplies to support them if they have to do EVAs on board. But the cargo they'll be bringing down is science, and it comes from across the spectrum. We have student experiments in seeds that will be returning with the Crew Dragon. We also have a number of experiments that are dependent on their samples returning in frozen lockers on board the SpaceX Dragon to be able to do the science there. Those include rodent research tissues from the National Lab Rodent Research 17 mission, and also our veggie experiments, which are experiments in growing plants in space that will be needed when we go to more distant locations like the Moon and Mars.
International Space Station Chief Scientist Kurt Costello, thank you so much for your time. Let's hear now from one of the next astronauts to fly to station on a Crew Dragon, talking with Marina Jurica. Marina.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be a part of today's momentous launch. My guest is no stranger to the International Space Station and will return there for the first time in nearly a decade for his third space flight with the Crew 1 launch expected later this year. Having logged 177 days in space from flights on the Space Shuttle Discovery to the Soyuz, JAXA astronaut Soichi Noguchi will have spent more time in space than any of his other crewmates. It is my pleasure to welcome him here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Soichi. Honjitsu wa arigato gozaimasu.
Wow, that's wonderful. Marina, how are you doing? Thanks for having me today. This is wonderful. Today we are celebrating the launch, so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here with us. I am sure you have felt the excitement for today's launch, Soichi, and you will be on the next Crew Dragon flight after this one. Are you excited to launch from Kennedy Space Center again, and how are you preparing for this new vehicle?
Yes, definitely we are excited to go back to Kennedy Space Center. My first space flight was from Kennedy Space Center on the Space Shuttle Discovery. That was 15 years ago, but my memory is still fresh. I still feel the vibration of the launch, the same launch pad of 39A that the Demo 2 go up, and the same launch pad that we will go up as a Crew 1. And our crew is getting ready for the final training phase, which will come in the coming weeks. And the mood is really high, and we are ready to go up.
And as you know, the International Space Station and space exploration is an international effort. How do you feel representing the Japanese Space Agency once again on the ISS?
Well, I think the strengths of the International Space Station is the diversity of all the participating countries, and adding diversity is definitely gives a rigidity to the program. And the same applies to our Crew 1. Our Crew 1, we are 4 of us, but quite a different background, quite a different ethnicity, and definitely the diversity is the key word of our success to the Crew 1.
And I'm sure it will be very successful. What are you looking forward to once you get back to the ISS?
Well, this will be my third visit to the International Space Station. I like to see the things my colleagues keep saying, hey, you got to visit the space station again because it's getting more comfortable, more roomy, and I cannot wait to go back to my sleep station after 10 years.
And nothing beats that view, does it?
Oh, definitely. My last flight, we actually installed a big window called the cupola, and that was a big hit, obviously. This is the number one leisure time for astronauts, and I'm ready to shoot as many photos as I can this time as well.
Amazing. I will look forward to seeing those photos. I'm sure you remember exactly what it feels like in these moments right before a launch. What do you think Robert Behnken and Douglas Hurley are feeling right now as they prepare to head to the ISS?
Well, Doug and Bob's space shuttle veterans, they know the drill. They have launched. They experienced the launch before, so I think they're pretty relaxed. And so far through my training, I learned that most of the steps before the launch is quite similar to what we have in the space shuttle days. So different suit, different vehicle, but all the necessity steps to go up into the capsule should feel similar. So I'm pretty sure they are relaxed. Of course, they are very excited.
I'm sure they are. Gokatsuyaku wo oinori shite imasu. Honjitsu wa arigato gozaimashita. Thank you so much, Soichi, for joining us today.
Oh, Marina, you are so good. Domo arigato. And we'll both enjoy the beautiful lunch today. Thank you very much for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good luck with your launch later this year. And as the excitement builds towards launch, I will send it back to you.
Thank you, Marina. I now have the distinct pleasure of being joined by one of NASA's record-setting astronauts and a recent resident aboard the International Space Station, Christina Cook. Christina, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Dan.
Christina, we're coming up on 20 years of continuous human presence on the space station, and you were one of those humans. What's it like to see a new milestone like this launch unfold after so much history already?
So much history indeed. It is really just such a testament to NASA. Not only are we pushing the boundaries of knowledge and discovery and exploration, but we're pushing the boundaries on how we accomplish that mission. We're bringing in commercial partners. We're fostering a space economy. So we're making sure that we're always pushing forward, always taking that next step. I think it's such a privilege to be part of an organization that recognizes if we're not actually making steps and innovating every single time we do this, then we're not truly answering humanity's call to explore and to push those boundaries.
Christina, I know Bob and Doug are veterans themselves, but what advice do you have for Bob and Doug, given your experience as a long-duration station crew member?
Well, being able to live on board the International Space Station and work there is just such a privilege. You know, you're a steward of this amazing laboratory that's bringing so many benefits down to Earth and also learning how we can push farther into the universe. So it is quite an honor, and I think that's the main thing about how it feels to be up there for a long duration. You know, in terms of advice, Bob and Doug have been great mentors for me. They've given me advice for so many years. It's strange to be the one who could be in a position to offer them anything. But I would say that as, you know, shuttle flyers, they used to participate in missions that were really, really intense, go, go, go all the time. Long duration space flight is more of a marathon than a sprint. So I would tell them to take that moment, enjoy it, and, you know, really welcome the opportunity to have part of your mission be taking it all in and sharing that with the people that got you there.
Thanks again, Christina. Always a pleasure to hear from you and fantastic words. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So once again, once Bob and Doug arrive at the station, they'll be greeted by astronaut Chris Cassidy, but before we do that, let's toss to a briefing.
Hello, everyone. I'm astronaut Chris Cassidy, commander of Expedition 63 on board the International Space Station, flying 250 miles above the Earth. Like you, I'm excited about today's launch and the possibilities it will bring to America and to the world. But also, I'm very excited that two close friends will be arriving and joining the crew. I had the privilege of flying with Doug Hurley on both of our first shuttle missions back in 2009. Together, we came to the International Space Station and helped construct the amazing facility that it is today. Although this will be my first mission with Bob, it was my honor to follow him as the chief of the office when he left back in 2015 to begin training for this amazing mission. Personally, I've been very fortunate to fly in two different spacecraft. Launching from America on the shuttle, and most recently launching from Kazakhstan in the Soyuz. But I can't tell you how exciting it is to know that we're once again launching Americans from the coast of Florida. And finally, here's a story I'd like to share with you. Back in 1981, John Young and Bob Crippen launched on Space Shuttle Columbia, the very first space shuttle flight, marking the last time we flew Americans on a brand new vehicle.
434, Max Q48. Roger.
With them, they flew an American flag, representing America's technical prowess.
Roger roll, Atlantis.
30 years later, that same flag was flown to the International Space Station. This flag remains here today, waiting for Bob and Doug. Our flag means so many things to our country, and this small piece of America represents what we'll be able to achieve together. We'll never stop exploring. And so Bob and Doug can take this very special flag home to Earth, where it awaits its next journey to the cosmos. In a few years, The First Orion crew will take this flag with it around the moon. All of this starts today. I'll be watching outside the window along with everyone else in America and around the world. I can't wait to look out the window and see my friends on close approach. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and go Bob and Doug. I'll see you soon.
And that was a very special message from NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy, right now the lone American aboard the International Space Station, so he will be ready and waiting to welcome Bob and Doug when they arrive tomorrow, if liftoff happens today, a little later tomorrow morning. The countdown now stands at T-minus 1 hour, 25 minutes, 54 seconds, and counting until launch. And we'd like to share with you just how much has happened here at Kennedy Space Center since the last time we had a crew on the pad launching from here. As you can imagine, the end of the shuttle era was a bittersweet moment for many people across this spaceport. But in the end, we knew we were striving for this day, and here we are. Joining us now is Kennedy Space Center's Deputy Director, Janet Petro, on the comeback we've seen across Florida's Space Coast. She's with Daryl Nail now at OSB-2. Daryl?
Yeah, thank you, Marie. Janet, you were just telling me you were there at the crew walkout. Tell me a little bit about what you saw between the astronauts and their families.
So it was very historic. It was very emotional. So when Doug and Bob first came out of the doors, of course, a cheer went up from everybody. The Vice President was there, Elon was there, the crew families was there, and of course, Bob, myself, and the rest of the center leadership was there to cheer them on. But then, when they came out and then they went to the families, and Bob Benkin said, "Virtual hug," and he shouted out, "Virtual hug," and he did this motion, and of course his child also did that virtual hug, and so I guess that's the tradition of doing a virtual hug with the families. And then they, then they walked and got in the Tesla, either side, and the family walked right up to the window of the Tesla and were talking, having a private last moment with their father, hand on the window. It was very emotional. I had tears in my eyes. I don't know how many other people had tears in their eyes, but it was really a special, emotional moment, and everybody was, of course, wishing them well. A lot of I love yous, a lot of Godspeeds, a lot of Ad Astra, take care, all of that. So it was very special.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And in the context of why it's so important, Janet, you remember, you've been here since 2007.
Yep.
You were here in 2011 when Shuttle Atlantis came to wheel stop. I've talked to my uncle and father who worked out here. Layoff notices went out like the next day when the shuttle came to a stop. It was a very sad time. Bob Cabana, the director here, called it depressing. Tell me about that time and how far we've come.
Yeah, so as you note, it was the end of a very iconic program. A lot of people had spent their entire career working on the Space Shuttle program. So 135 flights, all of them launching from Launch Complex 39, many from 39A, where we're going to be launching from today, and then returning back. At the shuttle landing facility, those two iconic sonic booms was something that all along the Space Coast people really resonated with. It really felt in their hearts and looked forward to. So it was a very sad time, but I will tell you that 30-year program, we had planned for it. The workforce was incredible. There was a lot of people who, as I said, spent their entire career here, and they wanted to safely fly that shuttle out, and then they retired. There was also another large group of people that just wanted to put on their resume that they had been privileged to work on the space shuttle. So the workforce I was incredibly proud of, because they were resilient, they were dedicated, they were committed to safely flying out that shuttle. They didn't skip any steps, and regardless, as you said, that they knew they were getting their layoff notices. I think it landed on a Wednesday. They were getting their layoff notice on a Friday. They were in it till the end to make sure we safely flew it out. And of course, we had 14,000 workers out here then, which we have a lot fewer here today. And of course, our guest operations, you remember those last shuttle flights, everybody around the country wanted to be a part of that experience, and we at the center really leaned forward to maximize how many people we could get both on site and never mind how many people were lined up at the beaches all along the river to watch that last flight. And of course, today with COVID, unfortunately, we weren't able to have any on-site guest operations, which was pretty sad for this historic flight. But I'll bet that there's a ton of people watching from the beaches or from even their TV as we launch here today.
I'm sure there is, and tribute to your leadership and Bob Cabanas as well, getting things turned around here as a multi-user spaceport, getting the commercial entities in here. We appreciate all that you've done to make that happen. Janet Petro, appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Daryl.
All right, Marie, we'll toss it back to you.
All right, thanks, Daryl. And as NASA and SpaceX have worked for years to get to this moment, today's mission opens the door to an entirely new era in human spaceflight, not only for astronauts, but someday for the general public as well.
From the beginning, it has been our mission at SpaceX to help make humanity a multiplanetary species. And today's mission is an important step towards that goal. The key to opening up space access for people like you and me is reusability. Without it, traveling to space is just far too expensive for the average person to do. Imagine how expensive a flight from LA to New York would be if you had to throw the plane away after a single trip.
A lot.
Yeah, exactly. That ticket would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and almost no one could ever afford to fly. Both the Dragon spacecraft and the Falcon 9 rocket are designed to be reusable, which not only improves the reliability of the vehicles in that they're flight proven again and again, but it also drives down cost. This is essential to enabling not just a handful of people, but rather hundreds of thousands of people to get out there and to explore the moon, Mars, beyond. And I, for one, it is my dream to visit Jupiter's ocean moon, Europa. Leland, you're one of the lucky Earthlings that's had the opportunity to get off the planet and go explore. Where would you like to go next?
You know, Lauren, I think I would like to go to Mars and, be there for, about a year each way and then a year on the Martian surface. But the one condition I would have to have, my pups would have to go with me because it's about exploring new places, but taking your family with you. We have these crewmates that are people that you get to know and love, over a course of training, but it's nothing like having your family with you. And I think that's something that we're going to be seeing in the future, people living and working on other planets as a family.
I think
Absolutely.
there are a lot of people who want to see your dogs with you in space.
Well, we've seen them in an official portrait. I know that the dogs came in with you to take a picture in your spacesuit back in the day.
Yeah,
it is.
Well, we kind of snuck them in. No dogs allowed at NASA.
Well, they had their moment.
They sure did.
And knowing that the opportunity to fly to space as a private citizen or a private dog maybe one day is right around the corner, we have a new poll question on Twitter for you. So if you were given the opportunity, would you travel to space? Let us know, and we'll share the results a little bit later.
All stations come
All right. Well, there is not a lot of cargo.
Chief engineer technical poll for launch escape arming and propellant load.
All right. Now, while there's not a lot of cargo in today's mission, Dragon is carrying 2 special payloads, aside from Bob and Doug, of course. The first is a series of custom art pieces entitled Humankind by Los Angeles artist Tristan Eaton. These indestructible, double-sided paintings are made from gold, brass, and aluminum, and they celebrate how far humanity has come, as well as how far we still have to go. It includes a beautiful homage to the Saturn V rocket, as well as a nod to Bob and Doug's current ride to space. You can find more images and information about these pieces on SpaceX's social channels. Next, in the spirit of inspiring the next generation of explorers, we wanted to celebrate the class of 2020, from kindergarten all the way through graduate school. SpaceX and NASA invited students from around the world to submit their photo to fly on America's first human spaceflight in nearly a decade. Each graduate's photo was used to create a mosaic image of the planet Earth, which we printed and is being flown aboard Bob and Doug's flight on the Crew Dragon spacecraft. We received nearly 100,000 photos. So thank you and congratulations to all the world's graduates.
I am so proud of what we're doing today. And I think about regular people flying in space on a SpaceX rocket one day. When I first went to space, I thought my primary task of installing the Columbus laboratory would be my aha moment, but it was when Peggy Whitson invited us over to the Russian segment to have a meal. She said, "You guys bring the rehydrated vegetables, we'll have the meat." And we're doing this, having this meal, and it's with African American, Asian American, French, German, Russian, the first female commander breaking bread at 17,500 miles an hour, going around the planet every 90 minutes. And when I think of that perspective shift that I got looking out the window, flying over my hometown, flying over Leo's hometown in Paris, flying over Yuri's hometown in Russia, it brought us all together as a civilization. And I think that's what spaceflight does for us. The more people that have the opportunity to go to space will feel like it's an international family of people working together for the good of humanity and all humankind.
Absolutely. And it's exactly what that piece of art was all about.
Yeah. And following today's mission, we will be one step closer to a future where we can all have that experience. We can all have that orbital perspective and the ability to explore new worlds. In just over an hour from now, Bob and Doug will be the first people to launch on an American vehicle in almost a decade. For the team at SpaceX, it's really hard to put into words how honored we feel about the trust that Bob, Doug, and NASA have put into our team to carry out this critical mission. I worked on Crew Dragon for 2 years, and I can just imagine what all of my friends and colleagues are thinking right now as they sit in anticipation and excitement for what's to come.
Absolutely. And speaking of those who have carried the hopes and dreams of science and exploration, we have a few shout outs to share with you from some big fans of NASA and SpaceX.
Wow, we're making history again. The NASA program. I am there with you guys in spirit. Bob, Doug, good luck. I know you'll be fine. I'll be watching and got everything crossed, arms, legs. I'm tied in a knot. Can't wait for you to get back safely.
This is the first time a U.S.-built rocket has taken people into space in 9 years. It's quite an accomplishment. So for us at the Planetary Society, more rockets means more exploration. More people in space means more exploration. More countries involved in the endeavor of spaceflight means more exploration. This is how we know the cosmos and our place within it. So congratulations, SpaceX. Here's wishing your team, and the crew especially, a safe journey and the joy of discovery. Let's go.
And a big thanks to William Shatner and Bill Nye for those well wishes. And while we're keeping an eye on the pad, we want to bring in NASA astronaut Rex Walheim. If that name rings a bell, it's because he flew 3 space shuttle missions to the International Space Station, including the final one by Atlantis, STS-135. He was one of the last 4 people to ascend the tower at Pad 39A and head to space. And he currently is Deputy Director of Safety and Mission Assurance at Johnson Space Center in Houston. Rex Walheim, thanks for joining us. You and Leland actually flew together.
Hey, Rex Dog.
Great flight. Really enjoyed flying with Leland. Hey, old dog.
Rex, you flew on the final shuttle mission, we said STS-135 with Doug, in fact. What's it like seeing him in Crew Dragon right now?
It's great. This is what we've been looking forward to. You know, after the end of the shuttle program, you know, it was a very important time where we wanted to transition to this commercialization of space flight to allow these commercial companies to take our astronauts to and from the space station. So in the 9 years we've had since we last landed on Atlantis, we've really worked hard for that. We've worked with our SpaceX partners and our Boeing partners, and here we are. Today's the day. We're taking that first step in this new era.
What do you remember most about launch day for STS-135?
I think it was just you felt the weight of it. The space shuttle was a storied program, 135 flights, and thousands of people had poured their lives into this program to launch probes to the planets, to launch the Hubble Space Telescope, and then of course to build the International Space Station. So you knew the incredible accomplishments of this program, and so you wanted to finish strong. And then when it finally became launch day, you'd finished the studying, you'd worked really hard, and now it was time to kind of soak it in. And I think that's what Bob and Doug are doing right now. They're sitting on the vehicle, talking to each other, listening to the sounds, and feeling the vibrations as it starts up. And it's going to be a great experience for them.
Hi, Rex. What is your take on private astronauts going to space?
I think it's great. I think the more we can do to commercialize space to make access easier, the better we are. And I think that's part of this whole program. You get the cost down, then more people can afford it. And you get the cost down, you can do more things in space, more science, more research. And it is a transformative experience to fly in space, and I wish more people could see that. When you look out on the planet, like Lehman was talking about earlier, with your crewmates from different countries all around the world, it gives you a different perspective. It gives you a perspective that we're all crewmates on this planet Earth. And we kind of get that now with the pandemic. We understand that we're all in this together. And that's what the space program does. And I want to see more people get a chance to see the Earth from that vantage point. And I think it'll bring us all closer together.
Hey, Rex, a very serious question here. The worm or the meatball?
Leland, I saw you dissing the worm earlier. How can you do that? The worm is awesome. I'm so glad to have the NASA worm insignia back. It's great.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rex. We appreciate you. And as we watch Bob and Doug there in the capsule, we are an hour, 10 minutes, 57 seconds and counting from launch, and we're going to send it over to Hawthorne for an update. Jesse?
Thanks, Marie. We're just an hour and 13 minutes away from launch, and things are really getting ready to pick up here. Since arriving at the spacecraft, Bob and Doug were helped by our closeout engineers to get into their seats, attach their suits to special umbilicals that provide breathing air, pressurized nitrox, and a communication link to Dragon systems. They conducted leak checks, which were successful, and communications checks with the Corps here in Hawthorne, which is the person who will speak to them directly throughout the entire mission, as well as the launch director in Florida. This is where they are checking their comm path through both ground stations and the tracking and data relay satellites that we'll use to talk to the crew the entire way to the station.
That's right, and after those suit checks were complete, the closeout team was able to seal up the hatch, which also got its own leak check, and we confirmed that it was good to go. The closeout team at this point has already departed the area around the pad. They were about 25 minutes ahead of their schedule, and right now weather operators are kicking off their final check on wind speeds at the pad, which are going to be used, and they're really important for that final go, no-go for launch. Before we get to that final go, no-go, various teams at both NASA and SpaceX are going to do some internal go polls, just making sure conditions are good with Falcon 9, the Dragon, the crew, the range, and the space station before the final go is given. So let's check back in with Houston real quick for a status on the team there supporting the space station on their readiness for launch.
In Mission Control Houston, led by Flight Director Zeb Scoville, has been polled, and we're go for launch. All systems on board the station that are required to be healthy for the mission are reported good, and we're standing by. Station power and communication systems are looking healthy, life support systems and thermal conditions are normal, and the trajectory is right on track to ensure that Dragon's flight will meet right up with the orbiting complex as planned. Chris Cassidy aboard the International Space Station is finishing up some tasks, going into his pre-sleep period, and will be able to watch the launch of Bob and Doug. Mission Control Houston will largely be in a monitor mode for the first 18 hours of the flight, with the team here really jumping into the mix tomorrow when Dragon gets in range of the International Space Station and we begin integrated operations. So I'll send it back. Everything's green on our board from the International Space Station. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and Godspeed to Bob and Doug.
All right, thank you, Gary. If you are just now joining us, you picked a really good time because we are 1 hour, 8 minutes and counting away from launch. And this is our coverage for this mission known as Demonstration Mission 2 or Demo 2. Liftoff time still holding for 4:33 p.m. Eastern, tracking no issues with Falcon 9 or Dragon, and we're still waiting for that weather to hopefully cooperate. We're still tracking a few things like precipitation and flight through clouds. We're hoping that clears within the next 20 minutes or so. Over the last 3 hours, our crew members, Doug Hurley and Bob Mencken, donned their SpaceX suits in the historic crew quarters suit-up room and made their way out to Launch Pad 39A. They walked out of the crew quarters building just as every astronaut to fly from this spaceport still tracking a few things like precipitation and flight through clouds. We're hoping that clears within the next 20 minutes or so. Over the last 3 hours, our crew members, Doug Hurley and Bob Mencken, donned their SpaceX suits in the historic crew quarters suit-up room and made their way out to Launch Pad 39A. They walked out of the crew quarters building just as every astronaut to fly from this spaceport has done since Apollo 7. They were transported to the pad where the crew now now on board the Crew Dragon
Over the
spacecraft,
next
and we're
hour,
continuing to
we'll
get
conduct
views
a
of them
series
inside that
polls to get
cabin
ready
live.
for launch. Today is a historic launch. It will be the first time a commercially built spacecraft will launch people into orbit, and the first time since the U.S. has sent people to the space station from American soil since 2011 with the retirement of the Space Shuttle program. Over the next hour, we will conduct a series of polls to get ready for launch, have Bob and Doug arm the launch escape system, and begin fueling Falcon 9. Launch is set for 4:33 p.m. Eastern. This will include a 12-minute flight to orbit and then a 19-hour flight to dock with the International Space Station at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow.
Today's mission is the culmination of years of work between the teams at SpaceX and at NASA. Demo 2 is going to be an end-to-end flight test. We're going to start with launch today, go all the way to docking with the space station, and then when Bob and Doug come home, splashing down in the Atlantic. And this is going to be the final test for NASA to certify SpaceX for regular crew flights to the space station.
On those displays. And we've been hearing a little from the crew on board Dragon, which they are currently strapped into their seats, as you can see on your right screen. They're already through their seats, or they've already been strapped into their seats, and through communications and leak checks, they're able to follow all the milestones still ahead on those displays just above them that you can see there.
Go ahead. We're going to equalize the pressures in the common manifolds just to raise them a little bit. So we will be momentarily cycling the tank isolation valves. I just wanted to let you know for awareness.
Just wanted to take a pause to listen into the nets.
Okay, we appreciate that.
SpaceX team is working no technical issues.
So they'll be getting insight into all of the Dragon and Falcon 9 systems as we proceed towards launch. At T-minus 1 hour and 7 minutes, let's check in with John Innsbrucker for a status update on both of those vehicles. What's the update, John?
Well, the good news is we've had a smooth countdown this afternoon. SpaceX team is working no technical issues on either the Falcon 9 or the Dragon spacecraft. For the Falcon 9, operators have completed, well, they're actually still in work. They're going to complete in a few minutes propulsion checkouts that are being done on both the first and second stages. The team will be assessing their launch readiness with a final go, no-go poll. That'll come at T-minus 45 minutes, and that'll be followed by propellant loading starting at T-minus 35 minutes. Now, earlier today, Dragon operators performed a series of checkouts of Dragon's flight systems. The spacecraft is also currently go for launch. Our NASA crew, astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, that you can see inside the Dragon capsule on the right-hand side of the display. They are currently going through various screens, simple checks. Their hatch is closed, suit leak checks are complete, comp checks are good. The next major event for Dragon is going to be retract of the crew access arm that you can see on the left monitor up alongside the Dragon capsule. That's going to happen somewhere between 45 and 42 minutes before liftoff. Now, the big one right now is the range. The range is currently red for launch from historic pad 39A. Now, the air and the sea space is clear, and the worldwide network of ground stations, as well as the tracking and data relay satellites, they are ready to support Dragon as it heads into orbit. But the range is red for the weather. We recently did clear, we went green for lightning, but we are still violating several constraints. Rain, cumulus clouds, field mills, which is essentially you can tell that the atmosphere is energized around the launch site. We are expecting that we'll possibly clear that. We're going to hear a weather briefing at 1 hour with the expectation that those conditions may clear shortly afterwards and allow us to move into propellant loading. Also, we've been releasing balloons. What we're seeing at the upper altitudes is conditions look good for Falcon 9 with Dragon. No concerns have been expressed by the GNC guidance team right now. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window at 4:33:35 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, or just past 33 minutes after the upcoming hour. So we get one chance at it today. But currently, T-minus 1 hour and 3 minutes, just passing that. Falcon 9, Dragon are go. The range is ready to support, but now we're waiting on the weather as we've been expecting all afternoon.
The success of Demo 1
Thanks,
was
John.
a really exciting
We've got
moment,
an
and it
extensive
paved the way for
history
today's
now of
mission
flying
where
Falcon 9 from the Florida coast, and
away.
just last
Hopefully
year
we get
completed a
that
test
weather
run
from
of the
flying
mission
US
that were
astronauts
less
from
than
US
an
soil
hour
for the
from
first time
beginning
since
here today.
2011. The
Dragon and
purpose of
Falcon
that
9
mission
together
was to
have
demonstrate
years of
Dragon's
operational
capability to
experience, or what we
safely
refer
and
to
reliably
as
fly
flight
to and from the
heritage.
International
As I
Space
mentioned
Station.
earlier, SpaceX
The success
has
of Demo
successfully
1 was a
completed
really
21 flights of
exciting
Dragon
moment,
to and
and it
from
paved the
orbit
way for
since
today's mission
2010,
where we are
including
just
20 trips
moments
to the
away,
International
hopefully
Space
if we
Station.
get that weather,
Not only
from
have we
flying U.S.
conducted
astronauts
thousands
from
of
U.S.
hours
soil
of testing,
for the first
we've
time
also
since
enhanced
2011.
and added a number of Dragon and Falcon 9 together have years of operational experience, or what we refer to as flight heritage. As I mentioned earlier, SpaceX has successfully completed 21 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, including 20 trips to the International Space Station. Not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, we've also enhanced and added a number of safety features to Dragon.
Much of what was learned with the Cargo Dragon was leveraged in the design of this vehicle.
Cycling is complete, expected behavior. And wanted to hear if you were able to hear those.
We actually did, Jay. We were just making a comment about that. I heard some clicking, and Bob watched it on the systems display, so absolutely.
Back to what we were talking through as we're describing these systems.
Copy all.
A lot of what and that again right there, that's the crew talking to the core here in Hawthorne, California, who's going to be talking to them throughout their ascent uphill today. So they were just doing a quick checkout. Bob and Doug confirmed they were able to hear it. Sounds like everything's still good, so still no issues with Falcon or Dragon. Back to what we were talking through as we're describing these systems, a lot of what SpaceX did with Cargo Dragon has been leveraged into this Crew Dragon. The vehicle is designed to be fully autonomous, which means it can basically fly itself, but it also features a full manual override capability if the crew needs to take control in case of emergency.
Many of the other enhancements help towards SpaceX's goal of reusability and less refurbishment time between missions. So let's take a closer look at some of these advancements.
Standing at almost 27 feet tall from bottom of the trunk to top of the nose cone, Crew Dragon's composed of two main elements. We have the capsule up top, which is designed to hold the crew and any pressurized cargo, and then an unpressurized section known as the trunk on the bottom.
And the nose cone at the top of the capsule protects the docking system as well as the guidance navigation control system, or what we call GNC. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Crew Dragon spacecraft, unlike the previous version of Dragon, and that helps towards our reusability
Dragon
efforts.
SpaceX, we are at T-minus 1 hour. We're go for section 6. When ready, report go for launch.
SpaceX Dragon will put section 6 in work.
The trunk provides an attachment. So the crew just has a couple checks, and when they are ready for launch, we're going to hear them report to the core that they are go for launch. Continuing to walk you through the Dragon spacecraft, opposite of that nose cone is the trunk. We can see it on the left-hand screen there, where it's kind of split right down the middle, with the left side black and the right side white. The trunk provides an attachment point to Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and can carry any cargo uphill. On the outside, one half of the trunk contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system into space using SpaceX's new picotiling technology. The other half contains solar cells that are used to charge the spacecraft's batteries during flight.
SpaceX Dragon, Bob and I are go for launch.
And you heard that call out right
Copy,
there.
go for launch. Next up will be the go no go pull at T-minus 45.
Bob and Doug are go for launch, and next up
we're holding in step 6.5.
you're hearing it live from the nets. This is amazing, very exciting. The spacecraft is designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo. The seats are made of carbon fiber and will be custom sized for any crew members flying on board. And lastly,
that control panel that's centered between the pilot and commander seats consists of 3 touchscreen displays, and that just again allows the crew to operate the vehicle and fly it manually, but also look at all of their procedures, relative position over the Earth, the space station, any alarms, alerts, anything that they could possibly want to do on Dragon is through those touchscreens.
And lastly, our Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Crew Dragon, giving the crew the ability to safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit.
and that launch escape system was put into work a little bit earlier this year, again on that in-flight abort test. As we look to the future beyond this test flight, the first operational SpaceX crewed mission for NASA will be a little bit later this year after Bob and Doug come home. NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker, and Soichi Noguchi of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, were chosen to support this mission, being called Crew 1.
But today, Doug Hurley is the spacecraft commander for this mission. He previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions as the pilot on STS-127 and STS-135, which was the final space shuttle flight. Here's a closer look at Doug Hurley.
Please review your launch commit criteria. Again, this is to review and confirm no violation of launch commit criteria. We are tracking one issue with weather still. And I think we'll need to track that all the way down to launch to clear that. This polls also go for arming and launch escape system and a go for propellant load.
Pressure will come up at minus 8 minutes 30 seconds. And this is the on countdown net reporting that technical poll was completed. All systems are proceeding. We're monitoring the weather, as LD briefed. We're also looking at a watch item on a hydraulics QD rod ring. Ring pressure will come up at minus 8 minutes 30 seconds.
Stage 2,
and we'll be able to verify decay rate. No concerns at this time. Everything's reading nominal, but watching that item. No other constraints on Falcon 9 or ground systems.
Stage 2, RP1 bleed is complete.
All right, we just crossed the 55-minute mark away from launch. Sitting right next to Doug Hurley, who's closest to your screen, is NASA astronaut Bob Behnken. He is the Joint Operations Commander for Demo 2, and Behnken previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions, STS-123 and STS-130, and also served a tour as Chief of the Astronaut Office. All right, we just crossed the 55-minute mark away from launch. Sitting right next to Doug Hurley, who's closest to your screen, is NASA astronaut Bob Behnken. He is the Joint Operations Commander for Demo 2, and Behnken previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions, STS-123 and STS-130, and also served a tour as Chief of the Astronaut Office. So here's a little bit more about the man who said testing out a brand new spacecraft is an astronaut's dream.
That's really when Doug and I are in the vehicle, and it's our vehicle, and we're really in control of the mission at that point. When you go through the launch day preparations, there's a lot of moments that kind of stand out to you. One is the kind of the celebratory piece of it, which is that you're walking out of the suit up room and getting in the vehicle that's going to take you to the launch pad. When you close the hatch, that's really when Doug and I are in the vehicle, and it's our vehicle, and we're really in control of the mission at that point.
Test pilots, their task proved that man could fly into orbit around the Earth and return live and well to talk about it.
There's always a balance of managing risk as you go forward to execute a test point and figuring out a way to collect the data. We hear a sound. Okay, is that sound an expected sound? Or we see a light. Is that light an expected light? What's the source of it? Does it sync up with something else that's going on or not? So trying to dissect all of that in real time in your head is a lot of things happen like that on launching of a vehicle.
From St. Anne, Missouri, he is an Air Force colonel and flight test engineer. He flew aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour twice. Introducing NASA astronaut Bob Behnken.
The second time was definitely different than the first time. My career at NASA has kind of spanned a couple of decades at this point. I arrived with the class of 2000, went through the training program, primarily focused on the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station, learning those systems. Having launched a couple times on vehicles, you know, the second time was definitely different than the first time. You can feel a little bit guilty of, hey, should I study one more thing, or is there one more piece of information I should get? Am I really prepared or not? So that's definitely different between where I was on my first flight and where I'm at right now. It's been really interesting, I think, for both my wife and I to have gone through the process of seeing each other launch in space. I've seen her take that risk and had it be in front of her, and I've done that to her. There's just something different about watching a rocket launch when there are people on board. You feel a little bit differently about the pit of your stomach, and I can only tell you it's multiplied significantly when it's somebody that you know, and then somebody, of course, that's a family member. It's even multiplied more.
For me personally, as a spouse, watching everything that Bob has put into this over the last 5 years, the dedication that he's shown, the perseverance is pretty special. For both of us, though, the way our minds work, it won't be until sort of the mission is complete that you have really a chance to savor it and celebrate it. This is a huge accomplishment for an Air Force flight test engineer to be part of the demonstration mission of a brand new vehicle. It's going to be amazing.
Without a partner that has that same appreciation, I think it can be challenging for some folks. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that takes away from family that that my spouse appreciates, and I love her for that. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test. Really, my role on the Demo 2 mission is to make sure that we get this vehicle tested and evaluated so that we can move on to more operational missions at the International Space Station. We've got a lot of objectives on board the vehicle that we need to accomplish to really make sure that it's good to go. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test flight so that the future missions will have them available even if they don't plan to utilize them. Through years of the NASA team helping to share that experience and teaching them the lessons that we've learned by going through this, now there's another capability in the U.S. besides NASA to operate something of this magnitude. When is the last time humans launched on a new vehicle? Certainly on the American side, it's been several decades. On a deeply personal now we're at a time when we've got multiple vehicles under development. It's a great time from a space exploration time frame just to see all that happening, and it's because of this nurturing of the environment, being able to pull in a wider group of people who can contribute towards human spaceflight. It's a super cool time. On a deeply personal level, I'm really excited that my son is going to get a chance to see me launch into space. Being an astronaut has been a little bit of an abstraction thing for him because he's seen me do it in old videos, but he hasn't seen me do it for real, and so I'm excited for him to see this launch. I want to thank the entire Commercial Crew Program team that's worked together to get to this point where we've got vehicles in the launch pad ready to head to the International Space Station.
Hear that in a couple of minutes. We're just over 49 and a half minutes away from launch of the Falcon 9 carrying Dragon to the space station. Right now, the launch director and the launch team are preparing for readiness for launch poll. In this poll, the 13 members of the launch team will electronically indicate a go for launch. This is also the go for propellant load. Now, we're going to hear that in a couple of minutes, so while we wait, we are tracking you watching from all over the country. We're seeing large numbers of you logging on or tuning in from coast to coast, as well as around the world. We want to know, is this your first time watching a launch live? If not, how many have you seen before? Tell us using the hashtag #LaunchAmerica from your favorite social media website. As for me, this isn't my first one. I've seen a lot, but everyone is excited. Now, coming up, we're going to go into a readiness poll, as I mentioned. Currently, right now, on other nets, the SpaceX launch director is checking to verify the Dragon team is ready and that the NASA launch management team is ready. They'll come back at about T-minus 47 minutes with instructions to the SpaceX Falcon 9 team to make their final assessments. Then they log into the procedure. It's a little different than the old days where you would hear a go, 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 you know, position by position, all up and down the row. In this electronic age, everybody just clicks on whether they're go or no go. The launch director will then, at T-minus 45 minutes, summarize the end of the poll and will then provide instructions for the team. At the same time, we will begin getting ready for the crew access arm retraction, and we'll show you that on one of the screens that we've got up. But we're going to be watching that for about another 15 minutes. So it looks like we're going to be good to begin propellant load. Now currently we are continuing to monitor the weather. The weather is still red. It is improving. We're looking at one cell between the radar and the pad. We're keeping our fingers crossed that conditions will improve, but we're going to be watching that for about another 15 minutes. So it looks like we're going to be good to begin propellant load once we hear the polls. But we still have to get the get the range green so that we can actually do the launch in just 47 minutes from now. Let's listen to the countdown net for a moment. Right now, coming up on 46 minutes, 10 seconds before launch. Didn't hear any significant chatter coming over countdown 1.
Yes, launch director in the countdown net. Poll is complete, and we have a go to proceed with propellant load. Launch control, proceed with swing and crew arm. Arming crew arm movement for T-minus 45 minutes.
Right now, coming up on 46 minutes, 10 seconds before launch. Didn't hear any significant chatter coming over countdown 1.
Yes, launch director in the countdown net. Poll is complete, and we have a go to proceed with propellant load. LD, approve aborting the launch out of launch control, proceed with swing and crew arm. For urgent issues affecting arming crew arm movement for T-minus 45 minutes. Hold on the countdown net. Launch control. Thank you, launch control. Auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence. A reminder in control room on hold and launch escape protocol. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief CE or LD, and it will approve aborting the launch auto sequence and proceed to launch abort. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort auto sequence. Operators shall also advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fires imminent or occurring for Dragon manual escape flight rules. Remainder on fire alarm instructions. Here in Fire Room 4, in the event of a fire alarm, key operators previously briefed will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personal safety is threatened, we will evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly outside. One final reminder, they'll be arming the launch escape system momentarily. All personnel, please stay in your seats from now through orbit insertion and Dragon separation from the second stage.
The next one coming up will be arming of the escape system on the Dragon. And you've heard Mike Taylor, the SpaceX launch director, give instructions to the team. We've also just heard the call. The crew access arm retraction is underway. Great view from the camera inside the White Room as we see the arm moving away from the Dragon capsule, one of the major events necessary to get down to T0. The next one coming up will be arming of the escape system on the Dragon capsule. Now, right now, the next plan for Falcon 9, T-minus 35 minutes, we will begin loading propellant onto the first and second stages. Now, currently, Falcon 9's looking good, Dragon's looking good. The range continues to be go for launch in terms of the clearance around the launch pad, both the air and the sea space. Looking at the flight corridor, the ground stations, the NASA tracking and data relay satellite are ready to support. And we just continue to monitor the weather. Our team is getting constant updates. We're monitoring weather data sensors around the launch site, looking to make sure that we can get everything into the green position. The one that we're most
Copy all.
Sequence for us. We practice this, disarm the escape system.